Steve was always worthy. Steve Rogers lifts Mjolnir in Endgame, and the entire theater lost its mind. Most people treated it like a payoff, the ultimate reward for everything Steve had sacrificed across 11 years of films. But one theory argues that moment wasn't character growth at all. Steve Rogers could lift that hammer the entire time. He just chose not to. And the reason why reveals something much darker about who Steve Rogers actually is. Go back to Age of Ultron. The Avengers are taking turns trying to lift Mjolnir. Thor laughs at every failed attempt. Then Steve grabs the handle and it budges. Just slightly. Just enough. Thor's smile disappears for half a second before Steve plays it off and lets go. That reaction tells you everything. The hammer responded. Steve felt it, and he immediately understood what it meant. If he lifts it in that room, in that moment, Thor's entire identity collapses in front of everyone he respects. Thor's worthiness isn't just a power, it's who he is. So Steve let go. He kept the secret, because that's exactly the kind of thing a worthy person would do. According to YouTube, only 1% of you watching are subscribed. If you like content like this, please subscribe, it's free, and you can always change your mind later. But here's where it gets complicated. Around that same period, Steve Rogers was carrying a secret that had nothing to do with kindness. He knew that Bucky Barnes, his closest friend, the person he had protected and defended for years, had murdered Howard and Maria Stark, Tony's parents, and Steve said nothing. He stood beside Tony in battle, called him a brother, looked him in the eye across multiple films, and stayed silent while Tony had no idea the man Steve was shielding had killed his family. When Tony found out in Civil War, it didn't just end their friendship. It nearly got Steve killed, because Tony understood that the betrayal wasn't only Bucky's. Steve had chosen his friend over the truth, over Tony, over everything the Shield was supposed to stand for. So was Steve actually worthy, or does Mjolnir have a blind spot? Maybe worthiness was never about being perfect. Maybe it's about the weight of impossible choices. Maybe Tony forgiving made him worthy, protecting one person while quietly destroying another. Steve didn't lie for selfish reasons, but he lied, and Mjolnir rewarded him anyway. That's either the most human thing in the MCU or the most damning. Loki let Thanos win. Loki died at the beginning of Infinity War with his hands around Thanos' neck. Most fans saw it as a desperate, foolish final act. But one theory argues Loki's death wasn't impulsive at all. It was the most calculated move he ever made. Loki let Thanos kill him on purpose. The question is why? Loki had survived impossible situations his entire life. He faked his death twice. He manipulated gods, kings, and entire armies. So why did the universe's greatest trickster suddenly attempt a frontal attack he had no chance of winning? Because he wasn't trying to kill Thanos. He was trying to fail in exactly the right way. Earlier in that same scene, Loki had already handed over the Tesseract. The Space Stone was gone. But notice what Thanos didn't have. The Space Stone was in his gauntlet, yet Loki still had one trick left. His attack forced Thanos to reveal his hand, to use the completed gauntlet in front of the surviving Asgardians. Every person on that ship now knew exactly what Thanos was building and what it could do. That information reached Earth, through Thor, through Hulk, through every Avenger who learned what they were actually up against. There's another layer. Loki serves chaos. He always has, but he also survives until suddenly he doesn't. The one scenario where Loki loses is also the scenario that sends the maximum amount of intelligence directly to the people capable of stopping Thanos. He didn't die fighting, he died delivering a message. And then there's the 2012 timeline in Endgame, where a different Loki escapes with the Tesseract entirely. That version is still out there, which means the Loki who died in Infinity War made a choice the escaped version didn't. One ran, one stayed. If this theory holds, Loki's final act wasn't a failure of intelligence. It was the last con he ever pulled. He just made sure nobody, not even Thanos, realized they'd been played. The snap never worked. Thanos snapped his fingers, half the universe turned to dust, and everyone assumed 3 billion people were dead. The Avengers spent 5 years grieving. The world fell apart. But one theory, backed by a deleted scene Marvel tried to bury, argues that Thanos never actually killed anyone, not a single person. He just moved them somewhere else. The evidence comes from a deleted scene in Endgame between Hulk and the Ancient One. In the version that made it into the film, she explains how the Infinity Stones work. But in the original cut, she goes further. She tells Hulk that real death is permanent and irreversible, but then draws a sharp distinction. Thanos didn't kill anyone. He willed them out of existence. And anything willed out of existence, she says, can be willed back. That one line changes everything. It means the snap wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of displacement. Every person who dissolved wasn't dead. They were somewhere else, suspended, waiting. The Soul Stone doesn't just kill. In the comics, it contains an entire pocket dimension called the Soul World, a place where billions of people could exist in a kind of limbo, fully conscious, completely unreachable. The MCU had already teased this in Infinity War. The moment after Thanos snaps his fingers, he briefly finds himself in an orange-tinted place, face-to-face with a young Gamora. She isn't a memory, she speaks. She asks if he succeeded. That's not a hallucination, that's the Soul World, and if Gamora was there, so were 3 billion others. Here's where it gets darker. If the snap never actually killed anyone, then Tony's snap in Endgame, the one that defeated Thanos, used the exact same logic. Tony didn't kill Thanos and his army either. He willed them out of existence, the same way Thanos did to half the universe. Which means somewhere, in a pocket dimension nobody can reach, Thanos is still alive. A deleted scene even has the Ancient Ones say directly, "Those you've lost are not dead. They've been willed out of existence," which means they can be willed back. Marvel cut the scene, but they couldn't unwrite what it implied. The snap wasn't a genocide, it was a prison sentence, and the warden is still in there with the inmates. Quick before the next, please hit the like and subscribe for more Marvel theories. Heimdall chose Hulk. When Thanos attacked the Asgardian ship at the beginning of Infinity War, Heimdall had one final chance to use the Bifrost. Knowing he was about to die, he had enough power to save only one person. Most people assume he simply picked Bruce Banner because he happened to be there, but one fascinating theory suggests Heimdall made the single most important decision in the entire Infinity Saga. He deliberately chose Hulk because Bruce was the only person who could save the universe. Think about the options he had. Thor was still alive. Loki was standing just a few feet away before his death. Yet Heimdall chose Bruce, someone who had just lost badly to Thanos and couldn't even transform back into Hulk. At first, that decision seemed strange. Bruce wasn't the strongest Avenger, he wasn't the best fighter, but he was the only person who could do something none of the others could. The moment Bruce crashes into the Sanctum Sanctorum, he warns Doctor Strange and Tony Stark that Thanos is coming. Without that warning, Tony never leaves Earth. Strange never protects the Time Stone, and the Avengers are completely unprepared for the invasion. Bruce becomes the first domino that sets the entire story in motion. His importance doesn't end there. 5 years later, Bruce becomes one of the key minds behind the time heist. More importantly, he's the only Avenger capable of wielding the Infinity Gauntlet and surviving. Hulk himself admits the radiation is mostly gamma, the exact energy that created Hulk in the first place. If Heimdall had chosen Thor instead, the Avengers might have gained another powerful fighter, but they would have lost the one person capable of bringing back half the universe. There's another detail that makes this theory even stronger. Heimdall's powers let him see far beyond what ordinary people can. Throughout the Thor films, he's shown sensing events across the 9 realms and recognizing threats long before anyone else. It's possible he saw exactly who Bruce would become and understood that saving him meant saving everyone else. If that's true, then Heimdall's final act wasn't simply rescuing a friend. It was the moment he unknowingly chose the Avenger who would eventually reverse Thanos' greatest victory. And without that one decision, the Avengers may never have had a second chance. Strange killed Tony. When Doctor Strange looked through over 14 million possible futures, he famously told Tony Stark that there was only one where the Avengers won. Most fans assumed he simply found the winning timeline and followed it, but one theory suggests something much darker. Doctor Strange didn't just witness Tony's death, he deliberately chose the future where it had to happen. Then, moments later, Thanos is about to kill Tony. Instead of standing by his own words, Strange suddenly hands over the Time Stone, the one thing he swore to protect. Why? The obvious answer is that he wanted to save Tony, but the theory argues he wasn't saving Tony's life. He was saving Tony's future sacrifice. If Tony dies on Titan, nobody invents time travel. Bruce Banner understands the quantum realm, but it's Tony who solves the final piece of the puzzle 5 years later. Without that breakthrough, the Avengers never recover the Infinity Stones, and Thanos wins forever. Strange didn't save Tony because he needed him alive. He saved him because he needed him alive until the exact moment he had to die. That also explains Strange's final words before he disappears in the blip. There was no other way. Most people think he was referring to giving Thanos the Time Stone, but what if he was talking about Tony's fate all along? In Endgame, Strange never tells Tony what to do. Instead, during the final battle, he silently raises one finger, the same signal he used when explaining there was only one winning future. Tony instantly understands. This was the moment Strange had seen years earlier. If this theory is true, then Doctor Strange wasn't just the hero who saved the universe. He became the man who quietly chose which hero had to die to save everyone else. The Ancient One was wrong. The Ancient One had the Time Stone for centuries. She could see the future. She had defeated every threat that came for Earth long before the Avengers even knew those threats existed. So when Thanos started collecting the Infinity Stones, one by one, planet by planet, why did the most powerful sorcerer in the MCU do absolutely nothing? Because she thought she already knew how the story ended. And she was wrong. Here's what the films actually confirm. The Ancient One tells Bruce Banner in Endgame that she had already used the Time Stone to look beyond her own death. That means she saw Thanos coming. She saw the stones being collected. She saw what was building. And she made a conscious decision to stand down, convinced that the snap had to happen, that the grief and the 5 lost years and Tony's death were all necessary steps toward the one future where the Avengers win. She didn't miss it. She allowed it. And she called that wisdom. But here's where the theory cuts deep. The Ancient One couldn't see past her own death. Her vision had a hard stop, right around the moment Thanos began his final push for the remaining stones. Everything she based that decision on came from an incomplete picture. She was navigating the single most catastrophic event in the history of the universe, using a map that went dark halfway through. She didn't know the Avengers would win. She assumed it. She gambled with 3 billion lives on an incomplete vision and dressed it up as foresight. Compare that to Strange. Before handing over the Time Stone, Strange looked through 14 million possible futures. He did the full calculation. He saw every variable before committing to the path. The Ancient One looked as far as she could, hit a wall, and made the call anyway, alone, without telling anyone, without giving the universe a chance to find another way. That's not wisdom, that's arrogance wearing the mask of wisdom.